You guys probably know I'm a media junkie. I subscribe to more Substack than I like to admit, and I still get a physical newspaper, 2 actually, delivered to my doorstep. When I'm feeling bold, I even call Not From Concentrate, with its podcast and newsletter and forthcoming book, an independent or creator-led food media company. So when I heard about Ravenous, a new digital food media outfit, one of a handful like The New Gourmet or Caper or Best Food Blog, I had to have one of the founders, Courtney Smith, on for a chat so we could talk about food writing and reporting, starting a new media company, and their unique worker-owned model. If you're a media nerd like me, or a fan of independent journalism, or you just love food coverage, you are going to love today's episode. So let's chat with Courtney.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
Courtney Smith, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to meet you and great to be here.
Yeah, I was so excited when I don't remember if it popped into my inbox or I saw it on Instagram, but as a longtime food writer and food media person, I'm just so happy to see this whole new ecosystem of new food media appear. But for folks who maybe are not familiar with Ravenous, could you just share a little bit about what it is and how you all operate?
Ravenous is a worker-owned co-op, which means we're independent media, and the owners are the 5 of us founders. We all met working at Eater, and we're all a part of the same layoff. And as soon as it happened, we started a Slack, and some people had already been talking about calling it food vector, like what's the defector for food? What does that look like? And should we start it? And it took us several months to really commit and do it. But at the beginning of 2006, 5 of us threw some money where our mouths were and decided to get started building a website. So it's a food and culture website. We look at where the intersection of food in all of its ways, the hospitality industry, restaurants, food ways, just consumption intersect with culture. And that can be pop culture or lifestyle, really anything. And there are also, blogs that are mouthy, highly opinionated, which some of us are. And there are deep dive features, breaking news, research stories, just the gamut of content, really.
Could you give me an example of 1 or 2 pieces that have come out recently or have really kind of resonated, just to give folks a flair for what you're writing?
Yeah, 2 pieces have really gotten a lot of feedback for us. And one is Jaya covering the Attaboy union. She wrote just a newsletter about the organization of that union, because we all came from a union shop, and Ashok, Jaya, and Amy were organizers for our WGA union. And for them and for all of us, it's important to promote unionizing in food and in journalism, because we think it's really important to empower workers. So we've been featuring some other worker-owned co-ops and bars and restaurants that have unionized. Jaya wanted to write a newsletter about Attaboy, just letting people know that this union existed and here's the state of it right now. And that was really popular, but then news started breaking because the Attaboy management fired one of the union organizers for alleged theft. And that really got people fired up. Caught a lot of interest. People wanted to understand the story and understand what was happening, because it's someone who'd been at that bar for nearly 15 years.
And what is Attaboy for people who are not familiar?
Attaboy is a cocktail bar in New York City, and it's one of the world's 50 best bars. So it's a pretty big deal. The other one that really took off, and we got a lot of reactions, was a newsletter that I wrote about the enshittification of bagels, kind of pegged to pop-up bagels expanding rapidly this spring across the U.S. And they had opened new shops in Houston and in Chicago. And Ashok helped me out with the Chicago angle to talk about what he'd seen when they opened there. And it was really just a very quick hot take blog about how the problem with this is you can see with this rip and dip, that's not really a thing people do. It's not something bagels need. It's something that a VC company needs to cut down on labor costs. So why would you, just because you see something on social media doesn't mean you need to do it, but also the heavy use of influencers to promote their openings and the way that local media in our markets was covering it like this is a crazy, exciting thing without actually looking into who funds this company or why they're doing the things that they're doing. I wanted to talk about those issues. And just for me, in Dallas, we have a place called Starship Bagels that has beat New York City bagel makers in competitions in New York City. So I'm like, why would you go to a chain when you have this amazing homegrown thing to support? That got a huge reaction from bakers across the country. They had a lot of opinions, obviously. They also are not a big fan of venture capitalism entering into their space, but also eating into their customer base with these stunty moments. So I'd say those two we've been really impressed and surprised by the reaction. And we've developed an audience already who deeply care about workers and how they spend their money and what does it mean to buy ethically? What does it mean to support worker-owned and worker-supported businesses? What does it mean to support a union? We're excited about that because those are things we all deeply care about too.
Yeah. And who is your audience? Like, I'm sure it is vast and there's labor enthusiasts and there's food enthusiasts, but who are you writing to and who primarily is your paying audience?
I feel like we haven't profiled our audience, really. We did a subscriber drive for a month before we launched in April, and we definitely reached out to people that want to support independent media that just have that heart, and we reached out to people that really care about food and the way that you talk about it and want something richer, deeper, and fuller to read as an experience than just openings, closings, and lists. Which is not to deride those things. Those are important guides. Those are helpful things that your local newspaper should be covering. But we've seen spending on features, investigative reports, even opinion go down and down and down in favor of these quick, not surface level hits. So we want people who want more. And I think our audience is truly anybody who's interested. If you're interested in supporting independent media, if you're just interested in food, we cover it in a way that makes it really accessible. You don't need to know a lot. We're not crafting recipes. You don't need to cook to read our writing. You just probably are someone who cares too much.
I mean, I'm happy as a writer and someone in the media space, but I've also been having a lot of conversations recently with restaurant owners in my community. And, we all know how difficult the margins are and how difficult everything about running a restaurant is right now. But one of the things that I brought up and we've been talking about is that because there is not as robust restaurant coverage in the media space, that's also making a huge dent. Because I think about, to date myself, I moved to Boston in 2007 as a graduate student. And we were all talking about what is going on Eater and I used to write for the Boston Globe food section every week. And we had this sort of one source of truth, and there were problems with that as well. But what we miss is that then you don't have this sort of cultural zeitgeist energy that's sending people to restaurants, that's getting people excited on a cultural level. So I'm curious how you think about that piece of it with your reporting and your editorial direction.
We've been working through what does our coverage of restaurants look like. And we have a sense of it when it's a trend report, something that covers multiple restaurants. We really like this archetype we found of covering this is a food trend we're seeing everywhere, which we did with tuna tostadas earlier in the spring and soft serve ice cream. But when it comes to profiling individual restaurants, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't write reviews, and we're not going to get into that business. But we're trying to figure out what is a Ravenous profile of a restaurant at this point. Just for context for the listeners, we're relatively new. We launched on May 6th. So there's a lot of stuff that we're figuring out. We're doing a little bit of building the plane as we fly it right now, which makes us very open to listener feedback and reader feedback. So if you have any, feel free to swing by and tell us about it. We'd love to know. But I've been looking at that with a restaurant that just opened this June in Dallas called Oloyo, and it's one I'm really excited about. The whole community is really excited about. And I requested that the owners sit down and talk to me without knowing what the angle is going to be, because I'm like, I think we just have to talk and figure it out, because it has to work. We are a nationwide site. Like, I'm not just writing about Dallas, although I've certainly written many things about the Metroplex already at this point. So that is a question that is unanswered as of yet, to be really, really honest.
It's something I think a lot about too. I mean, a lot of my writing and reporting and stuff, which I'm not doing as much of right now because I'm writing a cookbook, but it's always been really Boston based. I've done, other sort of travel pieces, but now that I have my own little Not From Concentrate Substack and the podcast, I'm thinking about how I miss the local coverage. It's what's at my fingertips, but also you're writing to a nationwide audience. So it is really thinking about, what is that that is going to appeal to a broader audience. And I think it's an interesting challenge for all of us. And I think you're not alone, is my yammering response, is saying you're not alone with that. And it's something that a lot of us indies who now don't have overlords telling us what to do are trying to figure out.
Yeah, completely. And Ashok and I both come from the local, we were Eater's cities and then regional editors. And Amy and Jaya come from a more national angle. But the national angle really rarely covered writing about a singular restaurant. So I don't even know that this rubric exists for any outlet other than Food and Wine and Bon Appetit. And for them, it's about what is a restaurant, a food and wine restaurant? What is a Bon Appetit restaurant? And at the local level, it seems that coverage is as reviews, really. And if it gets a positive review, then it becomes a thing that goes into our rotation and we write about every little move this restaurant makes. So how do we break that model? We're asking ourselves that question now. And I'm with my Oloyo story looking at, well, they're doing nixtamalization. The chef is from a specific West Coast region in Mexico that's not typically written about and seafood heavy. So what is the bigger story? Because we're not really going to write a story that's just about this restaurant. We're not writing opening stories. So how do I take that idea of what they're doing and expand it into, and this is what people might be interested to know about the food and the region and the history. So it's a big lift. Honestly, it's a big boulder to take on. It's very intimidating.
Yeah. And so I want to understand more how the worker-owned co-op works. I know you guys have been very upfront about this and also saying listen, we're not going to take VC money. We're not going to use AI. You're putting some big flags in the ground. I'm so curious, how does your editorial process work? How does sort of the business of it work? We talk a lot about entrepreneurship on this podcast, and I'd love to hear your, understanding and experience so far.
Oh my gosh. It has been such a learning process. To the business side especially has been a huge learning process for all of us. We're deeply underskilled and just rapidly gaining skills as we go. So early on, when we started putting everything together, we broke up into committees. And I joined the tech committee and the design committee. And I ended up being the liaison with our designer to do all of the deliveries and talk about and be their singular person they could talk to. And then Ashok and I went out and had meetings with a million different platforms to talk about where we would end up and just ask all the questions we felt like we needed to ask. And we had weekly meetings with the whole group where we'll bring that information back. And Jaya and Amy ended up on the legal committee to work with our lawyers to develop an operating agreement. Ashok ended up on the finance committee, partly because his wife has a connection to Bank of America. So we're well, you could probably handle that, right? You can get us a bank account. What do you mean an LLC? I don't know what we're doing. Right. So it was a lot of people gaining individual expertise, coming back to the group, relaying information, taking down our questions, and then going back and asking those questions. That process back and forth so that everybody doesn't have to be responsible for everything. You can focus where your efforts are going to be. And also, we wanted to do this in a way we're all the money we've raised so far is going directly to us. So we've been paying off the bills that we accumulated to launch a site, and now we've started paying ourselves. And I think that's the most important thing that I want people who might subscribe to know. The great thing about a worker owner entity is that there's no CEO, there's no management layer, there's no fluffy money budget that needs to be doled out. All the money goes directly to us after we pay people who've done work for us. That's it. Like, that's how the money works. So that's why we want to be totally subscriber supported. The other reason we don't want to get involved with VCs, we're not taking sponsorship money either, except for events, because that's the one place we feel comfortable having branding. But all of us throughout all of our careers, not at one place, but everywhere we've worked, have seen how insidious it is to integrate branded content and sponsors into your content. We don't like it. So we're trying our best to avoid it as much as possible. We've all, at some point, gotten feedback on something that said, well, the sponsor of this event won't like it, so we can't run this right now or maybe ever. Screw that, was how we felt about it. Absolutely not. Like, is there a way, when we were talking about the model, we're asking ourselves, is there a way to absolutely never take corporate money? And the answer is not completely yes. Like, we're doing a launch event at the Beards, a panel called Food Media is Broken, Is It Worth Fixing? And we're taking a little bit of money for that, but it's to go directly to pay for the servers that are going to work at that event and for supplies, water, beer, the important things that you have to have. That's what that looks like. And for us, that's what feels good. That's what feels right. We are always in conversation about what the standards look like, who is an acceptable sponsor and who's not. At every turn, whenever we are working with them, we're trying to choose the option that is most aligned with our values and push back on entities and people that don't feel right or who have been bad actors as much as we can. But I personally have been working on another project, which is about indie rock in the 2000s, and a big conversation in that, a whole episode of it, it's a podcast, is dedicated to the idea of selling out and what does that mean and who gets to do it. And that was a big conversation with those people in that decade. And it's made me really think about, is there a line? And if so, how do you draw it? And when you're moving it, what does that mean? So there's a lot of ethical questions at play. And for us, having a subscriber-supported site really draws some firm lines and makes it really easy to stick by what our ethics are, and also makes us feel the most comfortable saying whatever we want to say.
Yeah, it's so tricky, and it's something I am constantly evolving. I mean, I came up in a newspaper situation where there was the strongest fire. I mean, I used to joke that I wasn't allowed to make eye contact with a PR person because it was so incredibly strict. And then I lived through the sort of collapse of that. And then I remember feeling really frustrated because I was thinking, okay, I agree editorially why we shouldn't go on a press trip. But I'm upset now that what that means is there's no coverage happening. And now I don't have a way to go take an afternoon and go visit an independent restaurant that never would have gotten that coverage. So there's this constant push and pull of the realities of living in a capitalist society, wanting to draw some lines for yourself. And then also, personally of, how do we as writers, creators, entrepreneurs, make enough money to live and support ourselves. So I certainly have not been as vocal maybe, or as line in the sand as you guys are. And I'm curious to learn more, and I'm interested in it. And I think it's really fascinating, and I'm excited to follow along and sort of see how it all plays out, because I want to believe that it can exist, right? Whether the person is a fan of Ravenous's writing or it's not even a thing that they're interested in, I want to believe that model can exist. And so I'm rooting for you guys and following along.
We have talked about the problem of subscription fatigue. Like there's only so many of these, especially as inflation gets higher and the economy gets tighter. There's only so many of these that people can realistically support. There are clearly people out there, like we've had people join our highest tier, they're called big spenders, for $1,000 a year. And there are people out there that can afford to do that and they feel like this is a place I'd like to put my money. But there are plenty of people who are like, I can't subscribe to another thing. We've kicked around conversations about, are we going to partner with some of these other independent food sites to offer like a bundled subscription? We haven't approached any of them yet, but it's something we're thinking about for the holiday season. Or would we partner with other worker-owned sites outside of food to offer a bundle so you can try different things and support a myriad of independent media? I think that's going to be something we have to have a conversation with prospective subscribers and our subscriber base currently to see like what would be of more interest to you. Do you want to maximize on food? Do you want to diversify what you support? What would be cool?
That's so interesting because I mean, I'm in that situation. I currently am cycling through because, every time I have a guest, I'm buying a cookbook, I'm doing a subscription. And then I always feel bad. Like I'm going to, realistically, I'm a paying subscriber of Ravenous. I'll probably have to cycle out because I have to explore another one and then I'll cycle back in. But it's definitely, a challenge. But I appreciate your, candor and sort of forthrightness with all of that. I'm curious, what is my last sort of businessy question is long-term, what are the goals like for all of you to, are you guys doing this full time? Is that a goal long-term? Like, how do you think about it, sort of the personal money piece of it, as much as you're comfortable sharing?
So we set a fundraising goal for us to be able to do this part-time for the first 2 years. And that means making $2,000 a month each. And we're there for the first year. We have a long-term goal in 3 to 5 years to start bringing people on full-time. So it will be a person at a time, not in year 3, all of us are full-time. Probably, unless everybody listening to this subscribes, then maybe it will happen faster.
We just got to find the right audience.
Exactly. Part of our fundraising goal is also money to have freelancers cycle in. We want to be able to pay people and pay them well. Especially our friends. We know so many people who have been laid off or who are just brilliant writers who we'd love to be working with. And we want to put their voices in Ravenous. We think that they're amazing. So a part of what we want more subscribers for is to do that, to pay even more people. But that's the plan. And the thing that we're also still learning a lot about is how to do fundraising. We met with a ton of different worker-owned sites going into this and heard a lot of perspectives. One that was super both helpful and aspirational to me was the 51st, who did their launch the same way we did with a subscriber drive in advance. And they got some negative feedback in the beginning saying that there weren't enough reporters of color to cover Washington, D.C. accurately. And that was really great to hear about because they took it to heart and immediately started doing a better job, not only of highlighting the people of color on their staff, but they brought on an executive editor who was a person of color after that and did a separate fundraiser to fund her job. That stuff was really, to know how much money they raised and how much support they got in advance of launching was really heartening because all 5 of us went into this thinking nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care that we're doing this. There'll be some people that care. Our families will care, but are we going to get enough people to care to actually do this? And seeing it happen for other sites, watching it, really, really seeing people's feedback, seeing the comments they left on GoFundMes or Instagrams or anywhere it made us feel a lot bolder. It made us feel a lot more okay, we can do this. We should do this. We should just find our confidence and do it. So that's, I think, going to be a big part of what goes into fundraising from now on. We're also making the time to go to seminars and learning and listening sessions when we can, which sounds so dumb, but it's actually
dumb,
incredibly
it's a part
helpful.
of it.
No, it's totally part of it. We're a group of writers who are not used to thinking about the business side, and this is the kind of stuff we would have blown off in our regular corporate jobs. And now it's this is a huge part of it. like all the time I spend writing. It's just half my time now. I have to spend a lot of time. This morning, I sent emails to all of our new top tier subscribers to remind them to collect their perks. So that's what it's like.
Absolutely. I ran a startup. I took a break from media to found a startup, run that for 7 years. And in the end, we had to shut it down. But I always say, I'm like, well, that was my business school. Like I was a tradesperson before this, and my trade was writing, and it was being TV talent. And now I have a business background. So it's all a part of it. I would love to hear, what is your favorite thing about being independent and this sort of new chapter? And then what do you miss the most about the infrastructure, if anything, of your days in legacy media?
The thing I like most about being independent is very rarely do we tell each other that editorially something is a bad idea. It might need to be fleshed out more. It might need to be a long reported story where we take our time. But there's so much support. Everybody really respects everyone else's talent and vision and passion projects. Almost all of what we publish are passion projects. And that is great, because that was not across my whole career, that has not always been the experience. And there's a lot of fighting for the stuff that you really want to cover. And here it's not a fight. It's never a fight. It's always just like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Or, okay, but I really want to know more about this. Or I think you should look at this. I think you should talk to this restaurant. Like that will help inform this story. That's wonderful. We're all in the process of learning each other's editing styles, which is also interesting. That's the part that's interesting. So we take turns. We have our cute little Airtable calendar where we put the things that we're publishing. And we have an assigned first editor who's like your Google Docs level editor who helps you shape the story and gives you a basic copy edit. And then your second editor is someone who looks at what you've put into the CMS, makes sure that everything's formatted right, and gives it one more copy edit. And it's been interesting since we rotate through people. I'm learning the different quirks and styles of how people edit. And we're all learning our quirks as writers. And I'm seeing the ways that some of our voices differ from each other and our strengths and weaknesses. It's really fun. And that's actually something I'm excited about, because once I know all of this stuff, like the back of my hand, I'm going to be working with these people for years as far as I'm concerned.
Do you have like a style or because, every publication has its own either explicit or implicit voiciness rules, whatever. Like, how do you handle the editorial style when there is so much freedom and so many, diversity of voices?
We have a style guide, first of all. Like our default is AP style, but we've already started to note certain quirks that are our own. And we've had to negotiate things like, I negotiated through a Slack conversation that I don't like the state abbreviations that are AP style after a city, and other people didn't like the postal code abbreviations. So we've settled on writing the full state name. Like, this is a whole conversation we had one morning.
That is incredibly nerdy editorial stuff. I respect that. That is not me. I don't have an editor's bone in my body. Like, I'm full on writer. The world needs more editors. I'm very impressed.
In terms of like tone, though, I think a part of the beauty of this is letting everyone be themselves. Amy McCarthy, she is also in Dallas with me, and she is one of the feistiest people I've ever met in my entire life. Like in person, in her writing, she goes hard all day, every day, in every way. And a part of the point of having her as be on this team and be a part of it is to fight for us externally. Like when we need to send a badger after someone, we'll send Amy, but also because we want that voice. Like we want her hot takes. I want her to write her unvarnished opinion on things. And that is what Amy does. And then there's Jaya Saxon, who is one of the sweetest people in the universe. And she really captures this millennial blogging voice because she's done a lot of it. And when I edit her, I've told her this. I've noticed like these specific quirks in her writing. And I'm like, I hold back from editing that into the way that I would say it, or other than changing some contractions, like I let your voice ride, because that's the whole point of letting you write, is to write as yourself. And then Ashok is such a great investigative reporter, and it's investigative stuff that really sets him on fire. And he's on a real tear about VC right now. Like, he's trying to push us all to write everything we can about VC invading food, which I mean, yeah. So with him, like, you just have to stand back and let him go through his methods. He worked on a crime beat for a long time in Chicago at the beginning of his career. Let him go through his sources and his methods and let him get there in his own time. And he doesn't really need you to shape the story. He knows the shape of the story. He just needs you to make sure that the facts are right and the copy looks good. So, and then Frances, who is actually, she has a social media background. She was an audience development person at our previous employer. And she has been way on top of our social media and told us a ton of things about best practices that we probably were supposed to know but ignored when we were taught them, because we're writers. Who cares what happens on Instagram? But we started a committee for artwork and a committee for social media, and she's on both, so that we send our things through Slack and get them approved or ask questions if we have questions. Just because we also are terrible at design, really. Like, some of us maybe have more of a flair than others, but figuring out what is your feature image art going to look like, most of us are like, I don't know, a photo I took on my camera? What do you mean? So that is also, there's so many things we're learning, Catherine. So many things we're learning. It's so interesting when you realize how narrow your skill set is, and you're just like, oh, okay.
I mean, that's what I miss the most about legacy media. I don't know, is the resources. Like, I miss being able to work, and those got peeled back, over time. But like, I remember the days when I would call the fact checker, and then I would make a photo assignment for the incredible photographer who was going to go do it. And then the stylist would come in, and, I understand things need to be leaner. I understand that, but one of the hard things, and I think that's actually what has kept me from being quite as pure as you all with, who you would partner with, is like, I sort of had to I was like, all right, so I'm not going to get sponsored by a tobacco company. But like, for me, I was like, okay, my most important thing is the editorial coverage I want to do, and being able to hire like the best craftspeople to do their job and give them jobs. And so if I'm going to do that, for just me personally, I was like, okay, I may have to be more open to, like, I'm going to have ads on this podcast. So anyways, it's a constant push and pull. So I guess I'm curious, how is there anything that you miss from legacy media, or is it like, get out of here, we're moving on?
Well, so in the process of working with our designer and figuring out what the site was going to look like, we got so lucky and got connected to someone who was a friend of a friend from Eater, and they gave us like a 90% discount to do an incredible body of work that really not only defined what Ravenous is, but included a lot of listening sessions to talk about what our references were and what resonated with us, and send us multiple options so that we could just have our gut reactions to them, our visceral reactions to them. And that was an amazing process, because it was like this interesting elimination, narrowing, but it was also something that we were just ill prepared for the language of. And I have loved at other websites, I've worked at some really beautiful websites, that there's just a design team that does these things, and it just falls down to you, and you're working on this beautiful product. And you also, they'll do trainings for you. Like, I've gone through plenty of trainings on how to take good food photos, but also what to tell photographers when you hire them, what a style book looks like, how to, capture something that is the aesthetic, that someone's predetermined is the aesthetic of the site you're working at. That I miss a lot, because I've worked places with really incredible artistic and design directors. I would say also I missed the dining budget. Like that was not something we factored into our fundraising for Ravenous. It is a stretch goal and a long-term goal. To be able to, we don't want to do parachute journalism, but we do want to like travel and do guides or highlight interesting things happening outside of the cities we're living in. So I miss having that budget built in, but hopefully we'll get there. Even when that budget was small, it was nice to have. And I mean, the one thing we talk about a lot is we're really glad we're doing this together, that there are 5 of us, because doing this, I can't imagine doing this by myself. Like it would be so solitary and lonely, and I don't want to do that. So I was really glad these people wanted to build this site, because it is so much, it's a lot of work, but it's so much more fun to do it together.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you're doing it. So we always end, Courtney. Well, before we get to the busy brain section, I had another question I want to ask. I think really just, was there anything else that you wanted to share about the site, whether it's like a pitch or hopes or dreams?
I am so excited. Like, I know what's on our calendar to publish in the coming summer months. Like, we have a pretty robust calendar through August, and I'm really excited for all of it. Like, it's all stuff that the people who I know are writing are super excited about writing. Some of them are like, I have a story that I've been trying to write since last September, and I'm finally going to get to do it. And it's about sustainability, and it matters to me so much. And this is a thing that I have learned so much about in hospitality since 2022, when I started really incorporating it into my coverage because of a restaurant that inspired me to, because they were doing incredible things with sustainability. So I just want to pass that enthusiasm along. Like, if you're listening and thinking about it, our site's $7 a month. It's like the cost of a latte. So even if you just do it for 1 month, give us a shot. There's some really good stuff coming up this summer that I think you'll enjoy.
Awesome. And I did, Courtney, just think of my last question that I didn't write down, typical me, but wanted to ask. For someone who's listening and they have their own sort of creative project that's going to involve working with other people, and they're feeling overwhelmed, intimidated, like, what's some advice or learnings that you could give to folks who are thinking about starting something like this of their own?
Ooh, okay. If you're doing it with other people, the first thing you're going to want to talk about is what's your vision, and make sure you're all aligned. And the second thing you're going to want to talk about are what are your ethics, and make sure you're all aligned. Everything falls into place from there. I think it's really important to let your ethics lead your business decision. So a lot of things will rule themselves out as long as you all have talked through those things. Those are hard things to talk about. And the passion part of the project, you're going to find comes together really easily. The stuff that you're doing it for, that you're the most excited to do, that's going to fall in line. The stuff that's really hard is making the business decisions. Like, honestly, it's so boring, but are you going to be an LLC, an S Corp, a partnership, something else, and why? And like understanding those business models. That stuff, getting it sorted, it was a huge learning curve for us. It will be for anyone who's a creative wanting to do something like this. Tap into your community, ask them questions. There are groups like Lawyers for Reporters that work pro bono who will answer your questions and help you get there. But honestly, talking that stuff out and doing it in a very frank way that is representative of who you are is going to be the thing that saves you from a million terrible fights in the future.
I imagine you have to speak very directly and very honestly. I mean, 5 people is a lot of people, and that's great from a production standpoint, a community standpoint, but it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So I imagine communication is really important.
If we didn't align ideologically from the beginning, this would have been a nightmare, but we did. And that's why a big part of why everyone who is involved wanted to be involved. But also since we all come from a union background, we're using majority rules and union conversation techniques. So
interesting.
You should be talking and persuading people into your point of view, and other people should be willing to give and say, all right, well, this isn't my hard line. So if everybody else feels like this, then okay, I can accept that. Or if it is a super hard line, you still might have to compromise on it and just accept that that conversation is not going to go the way that you want it to. Like, that's a huge part of why things work for us.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've had conversations before about, using improv as something that I'm really interested in and as a way of, getting sort of from point A to point B. But I've never even had a real job. I've always worked for myself. So I've also never been in a union. And I think that's really interesting. And I'm sure so helpful that you all have that background that you're coming to this with.
So you have to accept that sometimes the point is just to have your point of view heard, not necessarily accepted or adopted, but just to feel heard.
That's a great great thing to remember. So Courtney, we always end the podcast the same way, which is with what I call the busy brain section. So 2 questions. The first for you is, how do you spark creativity in the kitchen when you are not feeling that flowing?
When I don't feel my own creativity flowing, I steal someone else's. Like, for me, I'm a big fan of Smitten Kitchen's recipes and the New York Times recipe section, in part because I know they're pretty thoroughly tested, and I am less of a developer, more of a follower when it comes to cooking. I just like good instructions that I can follow. So I let the creativity or the inspiration come from reading something and saying, ooh, that sounds like a great combination. That sounds like it would nourish me. That sounds like the thing my body has been asking for that I didn't know I needed. Oh, yeah, I do want zucchinis now. Oh, right, it's tomato season. I need to make a tomato pie. And I just let other people's creativity mesh with mine. And just doing, for me, kitchen work can be a bit methodical. And that's okay, because doing methodical things gives my brain a little bit of a chance to let its wheels run. So honestly, doing the dishes can become a creative act because I don't have to think about what I'm doing. So my mind can wander while I do it.
Sounds like we have very similar brains and taste. Courtney, those are some of my favorites as well. The second piece of that is, how do you calm the chaos in the kitchen? And it can be metaphorical chaos, it can be physical chaos, but when things are getting a little dicey, how do we bring it back?
There's always physical chaos in my kitchen. It is like a depository in my house. The kitchen counter and the dining room table are where way too many things end up. That said, I love a purge. I love to clean things out. So when it's time, when I feel like this has gotten out of control, there is something really, both in the kitchen, and closets are another one for me. I love to organize a closet. Just getting that one area under control completely, even if I know it's going to last for like 10 minutes. It feels very good. It feels very cathartic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. Remind us how we subscribe to Ravenous, where we go to find it.
Yeah, we are at weareravenous.com. And there's a nice big subscription button in the top right corner. Just click on it. There's some free content on the site. Things are marked as paid if you're not a member yet. Look for the items that are unpaid. One is Frances did this really adorable article where she brought out her journals, her food journals from 2014, where she'd illustrated what she was eating at her first grown-up job every day, and it includes really cute drawings that are like her ideal Chipotle bowl. So you can take a look at that. And we've also made our Attaboy coverage free to anyone to look at. So feel free to look at that too if it sounded interesting to you. And if you like what you're seeing, why not go ahead and subscribe? And you can find us on social media. Our handles are Feed Ravenous everywhere.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the launch to you and your team. Courtney, I'm excited to follow along. And thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun.
Take care. And you. I hope you enjoyed my episode with Courtney. And I hope maybe you're feeling inspired to check out some independent media. Check out Ravenous. Or maybe you're feeling inspired to start that group project or sort of collective undertaking that has felt intimidating until now. Okay, and you know what I'm going to ask you guys next, right? Have you subscribed to the Not From Concentrate newsletter? It's a great way to get recipes from our guests and tips and to stay in touch. And you can sign up at katherinesmart.com. And you guys, you can always shoot me a note with show ideas, feedback, or questions at katherinesmart.com. I read every one. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Not From Concentrate is distributed by PRX and produced by me, Catherine Smart, with audio and video production by Kevin O'Connell. Our associate producer is Allie Miller, and the theme music is by Kylie Daly.